that I've done in the past. And also reminded me that I haven't updated our website bio in a very long time. So, Thank you, Eddie, also for sharing so beautifully about listening. Really felt that in my body. And I feel moved by that intention here in this space for that to ripple out through my body and into others. And so I am honored to be here, and this is the first time that I'm going to be speaking publicly about something that is called core sounding, and that's the name of a practice and a model for improvisation, kind of broadly, although right now focused on improvisation for voice and movement. And I'm going to talk today a little bit about that practice. Are you Devin? I've seen this person's eyes who I've seen years ago, and I'm just really curious. Hello. So I'm going to talk today about this practice, a little bit about Constellation Chor, which is the vocal movement ensemble that Lynn shared about, and also have time to demonstrate a few practices and ask you all here to play around and do some things to pair up if you're comfortable and try some of the practices that we play with. And we're going to listen to an improvisation that we've done. And really, for me, this is focused on practice today and on sharing how our ways of working together are really at the core of everything we do. So this isn't performance focused for us today. So that said, I wanted to actually invite Chaesung and Hanan to come join me, and if you can bring your chair up with you. Chaesung and Hanan are both longtime Constellation Chor ensemble members. And yeah, this is great. This is great. And so we're going to talk together and demo together. Thank you for joining me. Welcome.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, great. So I actually thought, given the size of the group and kind of just feeling the energy at the moment, that it would be nice for me to arrive by actually singing a little bit. And this, again, is not a performance. This is whenever we gather as an ensemble, the first thing we really do to arrive in the space is to make sound together, to make sound and to move our bodies together. So that helps us tune to each other's internal states and to the space that we're in and to the present moment. So I actually am going to ask us to do that right now. We're just going to make sounds and make silence, and you are all welcome to feel the space with us and also to join if you're inspired to make any sound along with us. Again, this is as a way of arriving, so like when Eddie shared about feeling our bodies and our breath, that's what we're going to be doing for just maybe 2 minutes or something. I made some note cards, which I've never done before, but I felt excited about that because, I don't know, thought it would be interesting to try a new way of doing something. So I started this ensemble called Constellation Chor many, many years ago, and it happened organically out of a group of people who were working together doing one of my shows, and we all wanted to keep playing together and keep exploring together. For me, at the time, this was almost 10 years ago, I'd say, I was coming from a very professional theater, music theater, somewhat new music world where I had the experience for myself in my own body that I was being asked again and again to leave so many parts of myself behind when I would enter any sort of professional situation, rehearsal space. And what I mean by that is that I was asked to compartmentalize, of course, not only just like personal things going on in my day-to-day, that is what it is, but also a whole host of energies that would be alive in me when that arise when I'm rehearsing, or arise in me in response to something a director is saying, or all of this life force that is actively flowing through my body as energy or as emotion. I felt like I had to put it aside in order to do the work that was being asked of me. And so what I was longing for was a space where, over time, not only could I be developing relationships with people that were very long-term, but also that I was trying to explicitly invite people to show up with all these different parts of themselves, and that in fact becomes part of the conversation of the work we're making to begin with. So this is, of course, on the one hand, could be something like verbal, like we all check in at the beginning of any meeting and share a little bit of our present moment space and what we're doing. But even more than that, even though we did that, it was about how are we tuning into, activating, and becoming aware of all of these moving parts of ourselves through the entire time we're together. And so in a sense, that in and of itself has, over these years, become a kind of practice that has transitioned from a practice into the art making itself. And that is, so in collaboration with all of these amazing ensemble members that I've had the great privilege to work with, and I would say there's about 10 regular ensemble members currently, and probably always around that number, but people kind of come in and out depending on who's in town and life phases and things like that. But over time, this practice had no name. It's nothing I own. No one owns any sort of practice. It's not like other people aren't doing this, but the thing is that we have together come to articulate a sort of practice that we share and that I now call core sounding. And the reason I gave it a name is because partly it's practical. It helps us talk about what we're doing. And also, I'm teaching this to other people, and my vision is to be teaching this to artists, non-artists, to all people who want to play within this framework of this model of practice, which is up there, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. That's this new kind of Venn diagram about how to work with this improv practice. And so one of the beautiful components of this practice is that we are consciously working with our energies and consciously honoring our sovereignty as individuals, and consciously honoring what's going on in our body, whether that be physical, like whether someone comes in a lot of physical pain, which happens with with chronic pain and things like that, and so we're honoring that, inviting that in, actively kind of talking about that and working with that in our practice, or whether it's emotional, where we're kind of talking about considering how can we channel these energies, these emotions that are alive in us through our bodies in a certain way, in order to show up fully, ultimately in service of being together inside of a group space. So the practice is, can I honor this fullness of my own experience as an individual, and what happens when I come into a space when there's other individuals with their own experience and their own needs, and those either jive with my own or conflict with my own, and what happens in the communication, in the meeting point of that space. And our language is nonverbal, and so that supports us in activating kind of these, I would say, deeper ways of communicating that are help us move a little bit beyond triggers and conditioned responses that can come so easily from verbal language. So one of the things that, so I'm really excited to share this practice with all of you here and to talk about it more. And my intention is I'm trying to articulate it. And this, like I said, this is the first time that I've done that. And I was somewhat nervous because, as I was telling Chaesung and Hanan before this, it's been so insular. We talk about this week after week inside of our group space, but I really am interested in sharing this practice as a way of being together, communicating, and I want it to expand, and my long-term vision is that there's many different, that this practice exists kind of all over the world, and people can engage in it if they're so inspired, if they desire, and it's already somewhat happening when there's people who have left the group and moved away and have met recently in DC to do their own way of practicing. And my interest around this is, what is it like when we communicate in this way that is beyond verbal language? Like, what can that bring to our communication, to our hearts, to our space? And not in some sort of kumbaya way. Like, how can we really allow the charge and the activation and the emotions that might arise between us, even if it's something that could feel really dissonant or upsetting or uncomfortable? Does using our voices and our bodies help us find a way to really be with that discomfort, really, in a way that is actually ultimately nourishing, and ultimately generative. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to communicating with all of you here and continuing this as a conversation, hopefully. So I think I do want to play an audio of something that you can hear a kind of 6-minute fuller group practice. This wasn't a performance. This was us lying on the floor at a residency in upstate New York a year ago or something, and just making a recording on a phone. And before I ask Charles to play that, I do want to say that one of the things I've noticed rather recently is that I studied integrative somatic trauma therapy, and I've been working with many non-singers and reading a lot of Peter Levine and studying with Peter Levine, who developed something called somatic experiencing. If some of you have heard of it, it's a therapeutic mode that's about tuning into the body. And what I've noticed is that there is so much intersection in that work and in the work that I'm interested in and the work that we've been doing. I feel like these are adjacent practices. And so studying polyvagal theory, for example, which is something that Stephen Porges came up with, and it involves how we can get into states in our nervous system that are supportive of healing or that are not supportive because when our nervous system gets more activated into what we all commonly know as fight or flight or collapse. And so that nervous system work is very interwoven with what we're doing, because actually what we're talking about in some ways when we're tuning in to what's alive in us is we're tuning into the states of our nervous systems. And so studying those whole practices and modalities have given me some other language to use that's precise in certain ways to talk about what we're doing. And I say that now because there's something I got from that world that just describes the experience of listening, of being in the world and noticing what channel, they call it what channel you're in. So Peter Levine called it, the acronym is SciBAM, but then Kimberly Ann Johnson, who was one of his students, changed it to TIMES, which I like better. And TIMES stands for thought, image, movement, emotion, and sensation. So the idea is that at all times, we humans are operating from experiencing the world through one of those channels. And then, of course, like any category, we can experience through many channels, or it can be quick changes. But the invitation through learning through that acronym really is to notice in your own body and your own experience what channel you might be in. And the idea is that in noticing that, it can help you connect to someone else, let's say an intimate partner who's in the emotions channel and you're in the thought channel. And so the two of you are just like, sorry, what the hell, what's going on here? And so the idea is that you could bring consciousness to that and say, hey babe, I'm in the thought channel, and I noticed that it seems like maybe you're in the emotions channel. And then you can decide, do I want to join that channel, or do I want to, whatever. That's the whole thing, how you're going to negotiate. But so I find that really interesting, because that is a lot of what we're noticing when we've practiced listening again and again over the years, is what part of us is being activated. And sometimes you'll notice as you're listening to music, right? Like an emotion arises. And then other times you might notice a tension like come into your shoulder and not even really know why. Sometimes you might notice, thoughts are the channels that we're often in, so we try to pause those a little bit. But you might notice just an image come up as you're listening to something. Like you might start to see just a stream of pink color going this way. Someone, it's like the language the language tries to search to describe the image. And finally, what I'll say about that is that it's sometimes that developing that language of channels can be referred to as the felt sense, which was coined by someone named Eugene Gendland, I think. I actually wanted to read something, one of these. Oh, yeah, so this is a quote from a woman named Susan Gregory that I just like. Awareness is a kind of heightening or brightening of bodily experience without setting out to work at changing it. So, the noticing of the different channels, or just like in meditation, the noticing of what's alive, helps you develop this felt sense in the body. And there was research that was done that Eugene Gendland did, which talked about noticed that in therapy sessions with clients, people who would respond, who would talk with him very clearly, with very clear language, would be quote unquote less successful. I don't know what that means. I'm just kind of using this more as a metaphor than people who were finding their way through language, kind of like, I feel this, I notice this thing. And that he called that the felt sense, and talked about how patients who had a developed felt sense were able to heal more easily. And so, this language of the body and tuning in, having these different vocabulary of describing what we're sensing and feeling can be a beautiful thing. And while we play this audio, I was going to invite you to listen and practice tuning into what channel you might be in as you're listening. So something that I do when I'm listening to music is I lie down and I pretend my body is like a stone or a rock, and I have no pressure to be moved by anything or to think, to analyze what I'm hearing or to have any sort of experience at all, but I do bring attention to breathing and softening my body and then noticing what arises. And like I said, it might be a tension or a feeling of pleasure or an image or a movement might want to come, or thoughts. So as we listen, and I would invite you to get comfortable, and maybe we can turn the lights down a little bit. This is a 6-minute improvisation, like I said, that we did as we were coming together to practice. And I'm happy to share it with you regardless, so if you just want to listen your own way, that is also great. But if you want to use it as an opportunity to tune in to what channel you might be in, and maybe you can even play around with different channels, then that's the invitation for you now. So if you can play that and turn the lights, yeah, thank you. you. So it's really amazing to be in a group and to get to tune to each other and improvise in this way. And I want to talk about one of the main things that we are tuning to, which is called gesture. And we are not making music from a kind of typical, I mean, maybe you can tell, but from a typical vocal improvisation group where we're starting with our understanding of melody, harmony, and rhythm, and using our musical knowledge of range and vocal parts, and tuning our ear first and foremost to the music that's being made in order to kind of say, okay, what spot in the music needs filling out? Like, okay, are there all these high notes? Do we need to add a low note? Oh, is there a lot of melody? Let's add rhythm. Oh, what kind of harmony would be cool? We don't do any of that. I mean, we do a little bit of that in the third circle, which is the third circle in the diagram, is called structure form. But what we do play with, what we are playing with is tuning to something called gesture, which is very difficult to talk about. And we'll work with unison gesture or harmonic gesture or counterpuntal gesture or dissonant gesture, and tuning our ear to how we can find what's alive underneath, flowing as life force through the body of the person offering through their voice or through movement, which there's a whole movement component that you didn't see because that was just audio, but we are using dance. And so we're tuning to what we can refer to as this life force energy alive underneath, and then we're trying to first and foremost connect with our life force to that life force if we're creating a unison gesture. Or if we're noticing like that one isn't mine, like I want to do this other one, we get really specific about what kind of, like with the same terms as music terms, like I said, but tuning to life force underneath. So there's so many ways that we work with this and practices that we do, and this is not theoretical at all. It's totally embodied. I mean, we didn't even talk about any of this stuff until recently, and we've been doing this for almost 10 years, week after week at Judson. But we'll demonstrate one practice that we do, and then I'll ask you all to do it. I think that'll be the next thing. And this is just a very small way of tuning in somatically, like I described before, and transforming that somatic kind of connection into voice or into movement. So this exercise is called the How Are You exercise, and I'll tell you what it is, we'll do it, and then I'll ask you to play around with it and see what it feels like for you. It doesn't have to be long. It's not so complicated. So Hanan, will you demonstrate with me? So I'm going to ask Hanan 4 times how Hanan is. The first time, Hanan is going to tune in to his body and answer in words or a phrase, a single word or a phrase, and express that. And then I will say, thank you. If you're the one asking, you'll say thank you. And then I'll ask again. And this time, Hanan is going to express that word through voice with the idea of illustrating to me what it is that he's feeling. And the reason for this is to feel what it's like to illustrate, because that is actually not what we're doing when we're not kind of like literally trying to use our voices to say what we're doing. We're trying to transform it into something artistic. So then I will say thank you, and I'll ask again. And this time, Hanan will express the same vocal gesture, but with added attention on this phrase, don't hold back the breath. And that is because in some ways that phrase provides the bridge between this literal expression becoming something more of a metaphor. And there's so many amazing reasons for that in my mind that have to do with what breath means in our bodies. And then after that, I'll ask again, and Hanan will take that same thing and turn it into like a 1 minute share. So, how are you feeling? You ready to do this? Okay, we'll find out. So, Hanan, how are you?
Ready and tight.
Ready and tight. Thank you. And now, how are you? Thank you. And now, without holding back the breath, how are you? Thank you. Now, would you take that and create something more? Hanan, how are you? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so besides just making me so happy, being so beautiful, I would say that that there's a gesture that was alive. I would say there's a gesture alive in Hanan that was coming out and being worked with and being returned to again and again. So there was structure and form, but before there was structure and form, there was connection to source, there was connection to alive energy, there was connection to something real, and that was alive in you, in your body, and then you created this gesture, this kind of repeatable version of it, and then you were able to form it with your musical knowledge. And that is this kind of core practice, which is in simplest terms in a way. And then it becomes much more complex when we're doing it with many people at once. So Chaesang, I'm going to invite Chaesang to demonstrate this with movement now, so you can see how that is. And the only difference in the how are yous is that the kind of bridge that to me takes it out of the realm of the literal and puts it into metaphor is not don't hold back the breath, but is also bring to mind flow. That's what we say. So the step 2 is more literal. Step 3 is that literal thing, but also imagining flow. So are you ready? So, Jason, how are you?
Deep and jittery.
Deep and jittery, thank you. And now, how are you? Thank you. And now with flow, how are you? Thank you. And now, following that into a piece. How are you? Thank you. Yes, thank you. So one of the things, and I was just reflecting on this with watching you, that I find so beautiful about this practice we're all doing together is that when we're able to get on the same page about improvisation how are we improvising, and we're able to talk about it together, then we're able to, and this is what we do, create pieces that are improvised. And we're all aware of the language we're using, and because we're able to improvise, and this is what is so beautiful and important to me, there's this ability really for each member of the group to be practicing like actualization, to be fully present in you, bringing who you are through this kind of framework. And so we're trying to do both. We're trying to be fully individuals alive, where we are able to create. We're creators together. And that's always what happens with improvisation. I mean, that's how it is. And then we're able to talk about it in this particular way. And there's so many other things too, and I think after this we'll just briefly mention emotions and how that shows up, and both of you letting your emotional experience about what you're doing be revealed on your face is something that we talk about a lot. It's really important to us. But right now, I would like to invite you to try this game. Please do, please do. So you don't have to, though. But if you're willing to pair up with one other person and just, come to the table, you can decide whether you want to do a voice or if you want to try it in movement. You don't have to go as big as we did up here. You can just stay seated. You can try movement, just with a little arm movement, whatever you want. And once you find your partner, I will repeat the steps. And again, if you don't want to, then just enjoy your life how you want to. But yeah, we got. I have no idea. God, I'm just talking and talking. Okay, so why don't you decide the person with the shortest hair will be the first asker of how are you? Or you decide however you want, but if you don't know what to do. So you're going to ask the other person, how are you? And they're going to answer with a phrase or a word. And you say, thank you. Please say thank you. And then ask them again, how are you? And you're going to illustrate that word through your voice or with your body. Say thank you. Then it will happen again. And this time, if you're using your voice, you're going to imagine, don't hold back the breath. And if you're using your body, you're going to imagine, don't hold back the flow. Okay? And then you can do it again and just kind of experiment. Take it a little bit longer. It doesn't have to be a full minute. It's like 20 seconds, 30 seconds. So step 1, how are yous? All right, and it seems like, has everyone gone? Tried it if you've wanted to? So thank you. You can come back to your place or stay where you want. It was beautiful to hear little glimpses. That was really cool. So, like I said, there are just so many practices and ways of working, and this is like a tiny little exercise, very, very small bits of things. But what I want to point out about it is that this staying connected to self, to what's alive in you, while making music, and then bringing that into interaction with others through voice and through dance, is like at the seed of what we're going for, is this staying fully present with all aspects of one's aliveness. And of course, there comes a time when we're not necessarily going to have everyone, all 10 people, just doing their own thing, like, fuck you, I'm in my own space, like. But the thing is that by inviting this staying connected to self, that doesn't actually come up so much. It's where it's like there's not really this kind of chaos or something that happens unless we choose to invite that in as part of our inquiry around the gesture, like a chaotic gesture. So just a couple more minutes, and I had so much more planned, but that's fine, because it is what it is, and it's really interesting for me to get to talk about this in this way for the first time. But I wanted to, this image, by the way, I want to say is by a student of mine and an amazing artist named Ree Tornello, and this is Ree's visual interpretation of the Venn diagram you saw before. So the 3 circles, body, gesture, and form, and the surrounded by what is infinite, by breath, by spirit, and I find it very beautiful. So wanted to share that's their piece, Ree Tornello. Yeah, thanks. So in the last couple minutes, I would just love to open it up for thoughts, discussion, questions, and we had a whole thing where Hanan and Chaesang were going to talk a lot, but they're also going to be here right now to answer questions and share from their experience. Just a few minutes. So please, if anyone would like to ask anything or share anything, also don't feel pressure. If you don't want to, we have plenty to say. Eve.
I was just going to ask the question that when you choose the 2 elements that you pull from for the exercise, is there any parameters around that in terms of, does it need to be emotional context, or are you drawing it from somewhere else, or if there are any guidelines on that?
Would you like to answer that, since I've talked so much?
Well, you asked about the 2 parameters, and actually we answered in 2 parameters, but it's not the basics of the idea. We answer with a word that describes our feelings, and we had a little more complex words. And I think it is something that is a little difficult to express what we feel in what word, but we try to tune in to something that we feel in our body or that we notice. I don't think there is a strict way to choose the word that we work with, but something that is alive in us, and if there is a lot of things, maybe something that we are tuning into and then going deep into it, and I feel like unfolding this word and emotion or whatever is alive in us at the moment.
Does that answer your question?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. It's like drawing on your instinct
Yeah.
and communicating that somehow.
Right, right. And one of the ways we sometimes have practiced this gesture idea is because we're not only drawing on the substance of us, but for example, like anything external and then noticing the internal response that we have to it. So we will practice gesture, for example, by holding a certain stone and kind of breathing with it, tuning to it, and then noticing how we feel about it or how we feel with it. Like, what is this stone? And we'll pass that along through the whole group. And obviously, everyone has their own relationship to it. We're not like monolithically trying to understand a gesture as like, we're all the same, we understand it the same. But in fact, what's so amazing to me about tuning into gesture or essence is that the more different perspectives you have on that same gesture, actually the clearer the essence of it becomes. Like, what is the essence becomes clearer the more people try to do it. From the more wildly different perspectives, musical conditioning, age, like just life stage, it's amazing. I mean, that's part of the point. It's like coming from completely different dance backgrounds or music backgrounds, then each person's kind of the channel that they will receive that gesture will come out in this different way. But hopefully we're tuning to still what is that gesture. Okay, any other question? Yes.
Hi, Marisa. Two questions. The first is, I know you're framing it as channels of consciousness, but it feels very much like there's the invitation to the subconscious, and I'd love to hear you guys talk about that. Second really easy question is, I couldn't read the handwriting between gesture and structure. Contained,
Trap, yeah, like to trap something, yeah.
Could you just explain what that means?
Yeah, sure. I'll try to say that part briefly and then have you answer the other one. So this is open, by the way. The other exercise I was going to do was have you all come up with your own words. This isn't like some definitive kind of experience. This was just me trying to articulate what these circles are. So the trap is that everything is one, everything is infinite. Everything is, at some level, from my perspective, all one. And so finding the essence of any aspect of the complete reality is to take something that is ultimately formless and capture it. Try to find what it is, try to contain it. And that is true also for body, and that is true for structure. So I could put that word in all three of those circles. Does that make sense?
So is trapping a good thing that you're trying to trap in essence?
I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't say that from my perspective it is good or bad. It is what we're doing sometimes when we're tuning, and something to be aware of. Like, are we, I mean, I would say it's like both. Sometimes it's finding, like catching a butterfly, you know? It's like, it can be a prison for the butterfly, but it's also, I'm having a hard time knowing how to answer that, because there is no good and bad in this kind of model, really. There are so many different sides to everything that we can do the same thing and do it in a way that, like, could maybe feel not so good. Like body, the expression of physical pain in the body. Like, on the one hand, we're experiencing physical pain. On the other hand, noticing it and tuning to it is already potentially freeing. And then learning how to channel and express it can be even more freeing, but it can also bring more awareness to the pain, which can be more difficult. So I think that's all I'll say for now, because just because of time, but I love the question. And as far as the other one, just so you can
Sure.
speak a little,
Yeah,
and then we'll be done. Thank you.
I'll try to answer it briefly on my take of it, on subconsciousness versus consciousness. I wonder if we are actually trying to make sense of the many different kinds of consciousness and awarenesses that we have, and that has been often called or put aside as subconsciousness. And so in a way, all of these different elements of our awareness in elements are our ways of tuning into what was called the subconsciousness and making all of the tastes alive in the making as a group.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for just being here, listening, trying out and playing and opening up this space. Really appreciate it. Thank you, and thank you.